He was healing. Fast. He fought back, kicked the assassin in the chest. They stumbled. "Who sent you?" David shouted. The assassin didn't answer. They attacked again, faster, stronger. But David wasn't human anymore. With a growl, he grabbed the attacker and threw them against the wall. The mask broke. It was a vampire woman, with the Queen's royal symbol tattooed under her eye. David froze. "You're one of hers," he whispered. The woman hissed. "She is no longer our queen. You are a disease. We will end this before she forgets who she is." She raised her blade again, but this time the queen arrived. Enough. Her voice was quiet, but filled with cold fury. The assassin froze. Her blade dropped. "You dare touch what is mine," the queen said. David stared at her. "She had your mark. She's part of your own court." The queen's eyes narrowed. "Not anymore." In a flash, she moved, and the assassin was gone. Just ash in the wind. David stood in silence. "They will come for you again," the queen said. "Let them," David replied. "I'm done running. Becoming more than human." David Kane stood at the edge of a dark mirror. His reflection stared back. Same face, same eyes. But something had changed. His skin now held a faint glow, almost silver in the moonlight. His veins shimmered under the surface like they carried starlight instead of blood. He was no longer just human. He wasn't a vampire either. He was something in between. Something new. Queen Saraphina watched from the shadows. Her face was unreadable. "You feel it, don't you?" she said. David didn't answer. He was still staring at himself. "My senses are sharper," he said slowly. "I can hear voices from the other side of the palace. I can see heat through walls. And when I touch metal, I can feel the energy inside it." The queen stepped forward. "You were not created. You were awakened," she said. "There is a deep power inside you, older than the stars, buried for centuries in your bloodline." David turned. "So what am I?" She smiled softly. "You are the future." Later that night, David walked alone through the palace gardens. The air was cool. The stars above sparkled like cold diamonds. He passed by fountains, strange glowing plants, and statues of vampire kings long dead. But the peace didn't last long. Suddenly, a shadow dropped from a nearby wall. David spun. His senses warned him this time, before the attack came. It was another assassin. But this time, David was ready. He caught the blade mid-swing. The metal burned in his hand, but he didn't let go. He looked straight into the vampire's eyes. Wrong human. With a burst of strength, he threw the attacker across the garden. The vampire hit a stone statue and collapsed, unconscious. David stood over him, breathing hard but calm. The queen's words echoed in his mind again. "You are the future." But not everyone believed in that future. In the highest tower of the palace, Queen Saraphina faced her inner circle. 6 vampire lords stood before her, all powerful, all old. They were not happy. "You share your blood with a human," one growled. "You betray your kind." "He is not human anymore," Saraphina said. "He is something greater." "Your heart blinds you," another hissed. "This hybrid will lead to chaos." "Perhaps chaos is what we need," she replied calmly. They stared at her in silence. One by one, they bowed, but not in loyalty, in fear. Meanwhile, David walked through a part of the palace he hadn't seen before. There were no guards here, no lights. He followed a sound, like music, soft and haunting. It led him to a sealed metal door. Strange symbols were carved into it. It opened for him, without touch. Inside was a hidden chamber, filled with books, weapons, and armor. But also faces, human faces. A dozen people turned toward him, half human, half vampire. Their eyes were sharp, their movements quiet, their faces full of pain and power. "Who are you?" David asked. A woman stepped forward. She had silver hair and dark eyes. "We are the forgotten," she said. "The queen hides us from the world." David looked around. Some of them were young. Others looked like warriors. "She created you." "No," the woman said. "We were born, like you. Hybrids, some from love, some from war, most from secrets." David frowned. "Why are you here?" "We are not allowed to exist," she said, "but she did not kill us. She gave us shelter, chosen by blood." David Kane stood alone on a high balcony of the Queen's palace, staring into the cold stars. He had not slept since the dream. The flames, the broken crown, her voice. "You must choose, eternity or freedom." The words still echoed in his mind. He had come to this palace as a prisoner. But now, things were different. The Queen hadn't killed him. She had shown him her secret past. She had looked at him like he was more than human. And the relic, it had glowed in his hand. David didn't believe in fate, not until now. Behind him, footsteps echoed. He turned. Queen Saraphina stood there, dressed in a long silver robe that shimmered like moonlight. Her expression was calm, but her eyes, those red, glowing eyes, were serious. "It's time," she said. "For what?" David asked. "To find out who you really are." She led him deep into the palace, past guards who bowed in silence, past dark hallways filled with whispers, past statues of ancient vampire kings. Finally, they reached a stone door covered in glowing red symbols. The Queen placed her hand on it. The door opened with a deep sound, like the heartbeat of a giant. Inside was a dark chamber. In the center stood a tall black pedestal. On top of it was a crystal bowl filled with glowing red liquid. Blood. David's body tensed. He knew what this was. "A ritual?" he asked. The Queen nodded. "This is royal vampire blood, older than me. Powerful. Dangerous. Only two kinds of people can drink it and survive." "Let me guess," David said. "Vampires. And those chosen by the blood," she finished. David looked at the bowl. "And if I'm not chosen?" "You will die in seconds." He swallowed hard. "Great." She walked closer to him. "You said you were ready to fight, to protect what remains of your people. This is the first step." David stepped toward the bowl. The liquid glowed brighter as he got closer, as if recognizing him. He looked at her one more time. "If I die, don't let my death be meaningless." Her face stayed calm. "If you die, I'll burn this galaxy to its core." David took a breath. Then he drank. At first, nothing. Then, pain. It was like fire crawling through his veins, like stars exploding in his chest. He dropped to the ground, screaming. His back arched. His eyes turned black. His skin turned pale, then flushed. Memories that weren't his flashed in his mind. A man standing with the Queen. His face was David's face, a sword soaked in blood. A kiss on a battlefield. A betrayal. A promise. A curse. Then, darkness. When David opened his eyes, everything was different. He could hear the sound of blood flowing through the Queen's body. He could smell metal and ash in the stone walls. He could feel a heartbeat of the palace beneath his feet. He stood slowly. The Queen stared at him with wide eyes. Impossible. David looked at his hands. His skin glowed faintly. His heartbeat had slowed, but it was strong. Not undead. Not vampire. Something new. "What happened to me?" he asked, his voice deeper, calmer. "You didn't turn into a vampire," she said, "but you didn't die either." She circled him like a hunter studying a rare animal. "You are a hybrid," she whispered, "human, touched by something ancient." David took a shaky breath. "So what does that make me?" She looked into his eyes. "Dangerous." That night, whispers spread through the palace. The queen had fed a human royal blood, and he lived. Many vampires saw it as a sign of prophecy. Others saw it as blasphemy. In a secret chamber deep in the palace, a council of vampire nobles met in the shadows. "This human must die," one hissed. "He threatens the throne," said another. "The queen has grown weak. She remembers love. We must act before it's too late." From the shadows, a masked figure stepped forward. "I will handle him," the assassin said. "Tonight." David stood on the balcony again, watching the stars. His body still burned with strange energy. He could feel power in his blood, but it frightened him. He didn't know who he was anymore. Just then, the wind changed. A shadow moved behind him. David spun, but it was too late. A dagger flashed. He dodged, barely. The assassin moved fast, silent like smoke. They wore black armor, and their face was hidden. Another blade came. David blocked it with his arm. The blade sliced through skin, but didn't cut deep. The queen's secret. The stars outside the queen's chamber window were quiet, but inside, David Kane's heart was racing. The relic had glowed. It shouldn't have. That silver star, ancient and powerful, had slept for 1,000 years. But when he touched it, it lit up like a second sun. And now, the most feared ruler in the galaxy was staring at him like he was a ghost from the past. Queen Saraphina didn't speak for a long time. Her red eyes watched David closely. She was no longer just a ruler. She looked like a woman searching for answers. "I don't understand," David said, his voice low. "What does this mean?" The queen walked slowly around the room. "That relic was given to me by someone I once trusted, a human. Long ago, before Earth burned. He was the last man I ever cared for." David kept his eyes on her. "You mean loved?" She paused. "Yes." There was silence again. David sat back down. His body still ached from the prison cell, but now the pain felt distant. A bigger storm was building. "You said he betrayed you," David said. "What happened to him?" The queen's voice was softer now. "He was a rebel, like you, but instead of peace, he wanted power. He used me, tried to steal my throne. So I destroyed him, with my own hands." She turned and looked out the window. "I never loved again." David stood up slowly. "So why me?" She turned back to him. "That's the question, isn't it?" She reached out and touched the glowing relic again. It pulsed once and faded. "Perhaps fate is playing games," she said. "Or perhaps he was reborn." David shook his head. "I'm not some ancient king. I'm just a guy who lost everything. I watched my people die. My planet is gone. I'm nobody." She stepped closer. "The stars don't choose nobodies. This relic chose you for a reason." He stepped back. "I didn't ask for this." Her voice changed, suddenly sharper. "None of us did." She walked to a corner of the chamber and pressed her hand to a black stone wall. A secret door opened, quiet as a whisper. "Come with me," she said. David hesitated, then followed her into the hidden passage. The path was narrow and old. Dust hung in the air. They walked in silence, their footsteps echoing on the stone floor. At the end of the tunnel, they reached a circular room filled with floating crystals. Each crystal showed images, memories. A boy laughing, the planet burning, a woman crying on a battlefield, a throne dripping with blood. "What is this place?" David asked. "My truth," she replied. "This is what I hide from the world." She touched a crystal, and it glowed bright. David saw an image of the queen, not as a ruler, but as a young woman, laughing, holding hands with a man who looked just like David. "That was him," she said. "His name was Eliar. He made me believe that humans could love immortals. He made me hope, but it was all lies." David stared at the image. "And now I look like him." "Exactly like him," she said. "But I'm not him," David said. "I don't want your throne. I just want my people to be free." Her voice was cold again. "There are no people left. You are one of the last." David clenched his fists. "Then I'll fight for what remains." The queen studied him. "You speak like a warrior. But warriors die. I'd rather die fighting than live in chains." She smiled, a small, sad smile. So did he. She turned and walked to a large crystal coffin at the center of the room. Inside it lay something shocking. A human woman, sleeping peacefully, surrounded by roses. "Who is she?" David asked. "Another human I failed to protect," the queen whispered. "She was a healer, kind and wise. But she tried to stop the war between humans and my kind. They killed her." David felt something heavy in his chest. "So you cared about humans once." "I still do," she said without turning around. "But they fear me. They always will." David stepped closer to her. "Maybe you're not the monster everyone says." She turned and looked at him sharply. "I am a monster. Don't forget that." But for a moment, David wasn't sure. She didn't look like a monster now. She looked like someone who had lived too long and lost too much. That night, David couldn't sleep. The queen had allowed him to stay in her private guest chamber, luxurious but empty. He sat on the bed, staring at his hands. Why did the relic choose him? Why did she see someone else in his face? And why was she showing him her past? Suddenly, a strange dream took over. He was standing in a burning palace. The queen knelt before him, her crown broken, her hands bloody. "You must choose," she whispered, "eternity or freedom." David woke up, sweating. A whisper echoed in his head. "You were not born by accident." The last human prisoner. The war was over. Earth had lost. The stars were no longer safe for humans. The vampire queen, ruler of the galaxy for 1,000 years, had won. Her armies crushed every planet. Her name was whispered with fear, Queen Saraphina, the eternal night. And now, only a few humans were left, hiding, running, or worse, captured. David Kane was one of them. He sat in a cold metal cage, deep inside the queen's dark space palace. His clothes were torn. His face was bruised. He had fought until the very end. But now he was just a prisoner. Guards in silver armor opened his cage. They pulled him up roughly. "Where are you taking me?" David asked. They didn't answer. They dragged him down a long hallway. The walls were black and sharp, like the inside of a giant spaceship. Strange red lights glowed on the ceiling. David could feel it in his chest. Something was wrong. Something big. Finally, they reached a massive door. It opened with a deep hiss. And there she was, sitting on a throne made of bones and crystal. Queen Saraphina looked like a goddess of death. Her eyes glowed red like fire. Her skin was pale as snow. Her crown shimmered with stars. David had heard stories of her, that she could fly, that she drank blood from planets, that she had not smiled in 1,000 years. He looked up at her. She looked down at him. The room was silent. A vampire general stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the last human prisoner. We found him leading a rebel group near Saturn." The queen didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on David. "He was dangerous," the general continued. "Shall I execute him now?" She finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but it echoed like thunder. "No." Everyone froze. "No?" the general asked, confused. "But he's just a human, a rebel." The queen stood slowly from her throne. Her long black cloak moved like smoke behind her. She walked toward David. He didn't move. He couldn't. She stopped right in front of him. "You," she said, her voice now a whisper. "You have his eyes." David blinked. "Whose eyes?" The queen didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and touched his face gently. The guards raised their weapons, but she waved a hand. They stepped back. She turned to her court. "Take him to my chambers." The general was shocked. "Your Majesty, that's..." "Now," she commanded. David was dragged away again, but this time not to a cell. Inside the queen's private chambers, everything was quiet. The walls were covered in strange, ancient symbols. There were glowing crystals, golden books, and a glass coffin with red roses inside. David sat in a chair. His hands were free now. The queen entered and stood near him. "You are brave," she said. "Most men cry or beg when they see me." "I'm not most men," David replied. She smiled, just a little. "I had a consort once," she said. "Long ago, a human man. He was strong, smart, kind." David waited. "But he betrayed me," she said, "and he died." He frowned. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you look just like him." She stared into his eyes again. "No one has ever looked into my eyes without fear. Until now." David stood up. "What do you want from me?" The queen turned away. "I don't know yet. But I know this. Your life has value. You are not a mistake." Then she pointed to an old glowing relic on the table. It looked like a star made of silver and stone. "Touch it," she said. David hesitated. "Why?" "Because if it reacts, then you are more than just a human." He slowly reached out and touched the relic. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, light. The relic glowed bright white. The room shook slightly. A pulse of energy pushed through the floor. The queen's eyes went wide in shock. "It cannot be," she whispered. David pulled his hand back. "What just happened?" She walked closer. "This relic only answers to those with royal blood, or to one soul chosen by fate." "Fate?" David asked. "That's just a story." "Not anymore," she said. The room fell into silence. Outside the window, stars burned across the sky. A new story was beginning, a story that would shake the galaxy. And David Kane had no idea what was coming next. David felt something twist in his chest. "Why hide you?" "Because the Vampire Council fears us. We don't follow their laws. We don't burn in sunlight. We don't die easy. We're proof that their pure blood isn't perfect." David looked at them. "So what do you want?" She stepped closer. "We want to be free. We want to fight." David took a deep breath. "I want the same." That night, David returned to his room with a head full of thoughts. He looked at the stars again. Once, they had felt so far away, untouchable. Now they felt close. He had found others like him. He wasn't alone anymore. But the path ahead was dangerous. The next morning, Queen Saraphina met him in the royal hall. It was empty. Only them. "You found the hidden ones," she said. David nodded. "Why didn't you tell me about them?" "I needed to know what kind of leader you were." He blinked. "Leader?" She walked toward him. "You think this is only about survival. But it's not. You were chosen by the blood. You are not just a warrior. You are a symbol." David crossed his arms. "I didn't ask to be a symbol." "Neither did I," she said. "But fate doesn't ask permission." She touched his chest lightly. "You carry the blood of rebels, kings, and something even older. The council fears what you are becoming." David looked into her eyes. "And what exactly am I becoming?" She whispered, "A challenge to the throne." In the shadows of the palace, more assassins were preparing. More blades were being sharpened. But this time, they weren't coming for David. They were coming for her. Queen Saraphina had ruled for 1,000 years. But now the whispers had changed. She has fallen for a human. She grows weak. It's time for a new ruler. The rebellion had already begun, and David was right in the middle of it. Rebellion in the shadows. There was a storm rising inside the palace. Not in the sky, but behind the walls. In whispers, in glances, in locked doors, and cold, quiet hallways. David Kane could feel it. Like a pulse under the stone floor. Like a storm waiting to break. He was no longer just a guest, or a prisoner. he was a threat, not only to the Council of Vampires, but to the very balance of power across the stars. And now, he had a choice to make. David stood in the war chamber, a round room filled with old star maps, glowing crystals, and weapons made for ancient wars. Across the table stood Queen Saraphina. Her silver crown was gone. Her armor, dark and sleek, reflected the firelight. "We are surrounded by enemies," she said quietly, "even here, in my home." David listened, arms crossed. "They think you've gone soft," he said. The queen nodded. "Because I showed you mercy. Because I kept you alive." David paced. "So now they want you dead." "They don't just want me dead," she said. "They want you erased. As if you never existed." David looked at her. "Then why don't we strike first?" She turned. "Because it's not time." "Not yet." He raised an eyebrow. "Then when?" "When they reveal themselves fully," she said. "And when you are ready." Later that night, David returned to the hidden chamber, the place where the forgotten hybrids lived. He found them sharpening weapons, loading supplies, and drawing maps. "What's going on?" he asked. The silver-haired woman, Amara, looked at him. "It started," she said. "The rebellion inside the palace. They're moving fast. We've seen royal guards switch sides. Even the kitchens are poisoned." David's jaw tightened. "The queen, does she know?" Amara nodded. "She knows. She's waiting for the right moment to strike." David walked toward the map. It showed the palace, but also hidden tunnels beneath it. "You've planned this for a long time," he said. "We've waited," Amara replied. "Waited for someone like you." As midnight fell, the palace lights dimmed. David sat alone in his chamber, staring at the stars beyond the black glass window. "She is no longer our queen." The assassin's words still echoed in his mind. He remembered the first time he saw her, on that throne of bones and crystal. She had spared his life. She had shared her secrets. She had trusted him. And now she was in danger, because of him. He could run. He could escape. He could disappear into the stars. But something inside him said no. Not this time. Not anymore. The first attack came just before dawn. A loud blast shook the palace walls. David jumped to his feet. Flames rose from the east tower. Alarms screamed. Shadows moved fast across the sky. Airships with the council's symbol. He rushed into the hallway. Guards were already fighting. Betrayers wearing black sigils turned on their brothers. It was chaos. David didn't hesitate. He grabbed a fallen blade and began to cut through the smoke and blood, searching for the queen. He found her on the west balcony, surrounded by elite guards. Her sword was drawn. Her eyes blazed like twin suns. "You came," she said. "I wasn't going to run," David replied. A faint smile touched her lips. "Good." A dark-winged ship appeared in the sky. A huge figure dropped down onto the balcony. It was Lord Cavor, leader of the council. His armor was black as space. His fangs gleamed. His voice was deep and cruel. "You were warned, Saraphina," he growled. "You chose a human over your own kind." The queen raised her sword. "I chose the future." Cavor pointed at David. "He is not the future. He is a mistake." David stepped forward. "Then let me prove you wrong." Cavor laughed. "Very well, little hybrid. Face me, and show us your worth." The battle began. David clashed with the vampire lord. Cavor was fast, inhumanly fast. But David had changed. He matched him blow for blow. Their swords sparked. The balcony shook. Lightning cracked above them. Cavor drove David back. "You are nothing. A shadow of stolen blood." David gritted his teeth. "No, I'm more than you." With a roar, he unleashed the power in his blood. His eyes burned silver. His sword glowed. He struck once, twice, and Cavor fell. The other vampires gasped. David stood tall, breathing hard. Behind him, The queen spoke. This is your new reality. Fight it, and you'll burn. The rebels hesitated. Then, slowly, some dropped their weapons. But it wasn't over yet. The queen turned to David. This was only the beginning. He wiped blood from his cheek. They'll come back. Yes, she said. Stronger, and with allies. The outer worlds will choose sides. David nodded. Then we need more than just palace guards and shadows. The queen studied him. There is an army, hidden far from here, half human, half other, but they won't follow me. Why not? Because I'm a vampire, she said simply. And they don't trust my kind. David understood. They'll follow me, he said. The queen tilted her head. You're sure? No, he admitted, but I'm going to try. She stepped closer. You could walk away, David. You could still choose peace. He looked her in the eyes. I already made my choice. And he wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for a future where no one like him had to hide. War of the Crimson Stars. The stars were no longer silent. They burned red now, bright, angry, and full of war. Dozens of planets across the outer systems had begun to choose sides. Some pledged loyalty to Queen Saraphina. Others bowed to the vampire lords who had rebelled. And many just waited, watching the galaxy tear itself apart. But far from the chaos, on a forgotten world surrounded by black fog and frozen rivers, David Kane arrived in search of something the galaxy feared. The hybrid army. David stood on cracked earth, staring at a massive stone gate buried in the side of a frozen mountain. Behind that gate, legends said, lived the ones who were never meant to exist. Half human, half vampire. Stronger than both. Cast out by the queen herself centuries ago to keep peace with the council. Now, they were his only hope. He raised his hand and pressed it to the stone. For a moment, nothing. Then the mountain shook. The doors opened. And from the darkness, they stepped out. Dozens of figures. Tall, pale, eyes glowing with silver fire, claws like blades, wings folded behind their backs. Their leader stood at the front, a woman with glowing tattoos across her arms and a voice like thunder. You walk into our home with queen's blood on your hands, she said. Explain yourself. David stood tall. I'm not a messenger of the queen. I'm a hybrid, like you. The warriors around her hissed and muttered. No hybrid wears royal symbols, she said. I didn't choose this path, David replied. But I won't run from it. She stepped forward. Then prove it. In the trial of flame and bone, inside the mountain, an ancient arena waited. No machines, no rules, just stone, ash, and blood. David stood in the center, stripped of armor, armed with only a blade of bone. Across from him, a beast was released, taller than a tank, made of dark muscle and glowing scars. A guardian from the old wars. You must survive 1 minute, the tattooed leader said. David looked at the creature. It roared, shaking the whole cave. 1 minute, David muttered. Easy. He ran forward. The beast struck like lightning. David rolled, dodged, slashed, blocked. His body moved faster than before, stronger, smarter. But the beast was brutal. It threw him into a wall. His ribs cracked. He stood again. Blood dripped down his face. He remembered Earth, burning, his friends, dying. He screamed, pushing forward with a roar of his own. He fought like a storm, blade spinning, eyes glowing, blood shining in the firelight. The beast fell, seconds before the clock ran out. David stood over it, chest heaving. He looked up. The warriors around the arena were silent. Then, one by one, they bowed. Later, in the fire hall of the hybrids, the tattooed leader approached him. You have our respect, she said. But that's not enough. Why should we fight your war? David looked around the hall, faces scared by exile, by centuries of hiding. "I'm not asking you to fight for her," he said. "Fight for yourselves, for every hybrid hiding, for every world where they say you don't belong." He walked forward. "They fear us because they know we are the future. But if we keep running, there won't be a future left." Silence. Then, slowly, a voice called out from the back, "I'll fight." Another followed, "We fight." The hall shook with chants. The hybrid army had found its general. Meanwhile, far across the stars, the Queen's palace was under siege. Dozens of rebel ships flew over the dark skies. Bombs fell like thunder. Fire lit up the horizon. Inside the throne room, Queen Saraphina stood alone. She had sent David away to find help. But now, the battle had come to her doorstep. Her loyal guards were falling. The royal banners burned. But she stood tall, blade in hand, her silver eyes fierce. "Let them come." David returned 2 days later. Behind him, the hybrid army. They rode ships made of bone and crystal, faster than light, powered by blood and fire. The moment they entered orbit, the battle changed. The Queen's enemies, who once laughed at rumors of a hybrid rebellion, now screamed in fear. David led the charge from the front. Explosions rocked the city. Steel clashed with claw. Sword clashed with magic. David broke through the rebel lines, carving a path toward the throne room. But when he arrived, the Queen was gone. He stood in the center of the burning palace. Ash fell like snow. Guards were dead. Walls cracked. He found one loyal servant, bleeding on the floor. "She's gone," the man said. "They took her into the shadow cages." David's blood froze. The shadow cages were deep beneath the rebel stronghold, a place where light couldn't reach, a place where prisoners were forgotten. David grabbed the man's hand. "Hold on. I'll save her." But it was too late. The servant was gone. David turned to Amara, who had fought beside him during the invasion. "We're not done," he said. Amara nodded. "Then we finish this." Hours later, they stood before the gates of the rebel fortress. Behind it, Queen Saraphina. Ahead of them, hundreds of rebel soldiers, vampire lords, and the shadow cages. David looked at his army, hybrids, outsiders, broken souls made whole again. "This is not just about her," he said. "This is about us." He raised his blade. "Let's end this." And the final war began. Eternal throne or eternal death. The sky was black. Ash floated through the air like snow. Red flames lit the edge of the world. And in the heart of the enemy's fortress, beneath stone and shadow, Queen Saraphina waited for death. Chained in silver, weak from blood loss, her once powerful glow was fading. She could still hear the voice of her captors. "You gave up your crown for a hybrid," Lord Varkos sneered. "Now you will watch your throne fall, and your human die with it." But she said nothing. She was not afraid of pain. She had lived 1,000 years. She was only afraid of losing him. Above, at the gates of the rebel fortress, David Cain stood with the hybrid army. His blade glowed with silver light. His eyes were sharp, calm, unshaken. The battle ahead would be brutal. The enemy outnumbered them. But none of that mattered. They had taken her, and he had come to get her back. Today, David said, voice strong, "We don't fight for kingdoms or crowns." He looked at the army behind him, hybrids from across the stars, forgotten for centuries. We fight for each other. We fight because we exist, and because no one gets left behind. The army roared. And then, they charged. The gates exploded. Stone shattered. Soldiers screamed. David led the front line, moving like a ghost, blade flashing, striking down enemies left and right. Rebel vampires fought back with fury, but the hybrids were faster, stronger, and more united than ever. The sky above was chaos, warships battling midair. The ground below was fire and blood. David pushed forward, straight into the fortress, his only goal in mind. Find her. Deep inside the dungeons, Queen Saraphina was dragged before the council's high seat. Lord Varkos raised a cruel blade. "This is mercy," he said, "for what you've become." She lifted her chin, even in chains. "I became something you never understood. Human." The blade came down. Clang. It was stopped mid-air by David's sword. Varkos stumbled back in shock. David stood between them now, eyes glowing silver. "She's not yours to kill," he said coldly. The entire chamber froze. "How did you get here?" Varkos hissed. David raised his blade. "You left the door open." Then he struck. The final battle wasn't just physical, it was emotional. David and Saraphina fought side by side. Like fire and shadow, like heart and fury. Together, they tore through the vampire lords one by one. Amara and the hybrid army overwhelmed the remaining rebels. The fortress cracked, crumbled, and screamed as centuries of blood finally came to an end. In the final moment, David faced Varkos alone, wounded, tired, but unbroken. "You're just a mistake," Varkos snarled. "A freak." David's answer was quiet. "No, I'm a beginning." With one last strike, Varkos fell. The war was over. But a greater question remained. Days later, the throne room of the galaxies stood empty. The queen's crown rested on its pedestal. The banners had been replaced. The palace was still in ruin, but it was silent, peaceful. David stood there, alone, staring at the throne. Behind him, Saraphina walked in, healed but quiet. "They want you to rule," she said softly. "I know," David replied. "You ended the war. You united hybrids, saved the galaxy, and gave hope to millions." David nodded slowly. "But that's not what I want." She looked surprised. Then, "What do you want?" He turned to her. "I want to rebuild Earth." She blinked. "Earth is ashes." David smiled gently. "Not anymore. There are survivors out there. Colonies, lost cities. If someone like me can live, then so can they." He walked toward the throne and placed the crown back on its pedestal. "I don't need this to matter," he said. "I've already won." Saraphina stepped closer. "You could stay, rule beside me." He looked into her eyes. "Would you come with me?" "If I walked away from all this?" She hesitated. She had ruled for 1,000 years. She had power, legacy, fear. But in David's eyes, she saw something no throne had ever given her. Freedom. She nodded slowly. Yes. The stars turned once more. The War of the Crimson Stars became legend. Queen Saraphina vanished from the throne. David Cain disappeared into the stars. But whispers spread of a new city being built on the ruins of old Earth. A city where no species was rejected, where vampires, hybrids, humans, and others lived side by side. And somewhere within that city, in a quiet garden full of roses, David and Saraphina walked hand in hand. Not rulers, not monsters, just two souls who dared to choose love over power.